I'm photographer David Flores, and welcome to the B&H live stream roundtable discussion for the Sony A9 camera. We have an incredible panel put together of storytellers, image makers, and photographers to talk about their shooting experiences with the A9 and photography in general. And let's just jump right in and introduce our panel. Sara France,
Hello.
Welcome to the panel. Sara is a photographer and entrepreneur, owner of France Photographers, and you guys are out on the West Coast. You've come down to Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
Where's next, Sara? What are you doing?
I've got my sights on a couple of cities, maybe San Francisco, maybe Seattle, maybe Denver, maybe Salt Lake City. Those are a few, but we don't know yet.
I can still work in New York.
Photographer. You can still work in New York,
Okay.
but unfortunately, we really only work with females.
I think that's great.
That's
fantastic.
We're a team of all females, so we're trying to continue to grow in those areas. Yeah,
Awesome,
it's amazing.
Awesome. All right, next up we have Ben Lowy. Ben is an international photojournalist. I know your work from back in 2003 when you were covering the war in Iraq. But where were you this morning, Ben?
I was underwater this morning.
What are you doing now? What are you making pictures
Well,
of?
I mean, I spent so long working in conflict zones and sort of trying to shine a light on the darkest parts of the human experience. But when I had kids over the last few years, I've really turned my attention to parts of the world that also, the beauty of the world. Like, you don't need to ignore that either. It's still obviously a worthwhile story that not everyone gets to experience. And I tend now to really live for the adventure of going on these in crazy stories and diving underwater and going on long walks in the woods.
Nice.
But and swimming with creatures that might eat me.
That's fantastic. Talking creatures, we have Kaylee Greer all the way here with us from Boston. Hi, Kaylee.
Hi.
Good to have you here. And you are the owner of Dog Breath Photo.
You got it.
You're a pet photographer, but you also do photography with social justice and animal rights. Is that right?
Yeah. So I got my start photographing actually at my local animal shelter. That was about 6 years ago now. I realized that a photograph has this incredible potential to save a life. And so, going into the shelter, photographing these animals who kind of peering out through the bars of their cages and realizing telling their story in a different way, in a more positive way, it can really be a beautiful, effective thing. So that's how I got my start. And all this time later, I now run a very busy private photo business in Boston where I photograph for private clients and kind of create artwork for them out of their own dogs. And also I do a lot of commercial work. So I shoot ad campaigns for some of the bigger like pet food companies and stuff like that. And always make time still for that shelter work as well. I get to go all over the world meeting dogs and telling their stories. And it's the greatest job in the world. I'm so grateful.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And another international traveler, we have Matthew Stith here. Matthew, you're just getting back from Barcelona shooting sport.
Yes, I was. Oh.
You didn't want to come back?
I did not want to come back.
No, you shoot primarily football, or as we Americans call it.
Soccer, yeah. I grew up playing soccer my whole life. It comes so natural to me, so picking up a camera and trying to document that like with the real passion, that's something that really brings me a lot of joy, and I just want to bring it to all the masses.
That's fantastic. So we have an incredible collection here of noted photographers. If you have questions about any of our photographic styles, how we use our cameras, the way we come up with ideas, and of course how we use the brand new Sony A9, please tweet them at us using the hashtag BHPhotoLive. That's BHPhotoLive. And when you tweet that question in, you'll automatically be entered into a contest to win a brand new Sony A9. And unfortunately, panelists, we are not eligible to win that camera. And it's all very, very sad. Well, it wasn't that long ago that the camera was announced, and Sony was good enough to come visit B&H here in New York City, sit down with Jake, and talk a little bit about the Sony A9. So we'll run that video now just to give some context on the camera.
Hey, I'm Jake from B&H, talking today with Kenta from Sony, and we got some brand new products to talk about. We've got the Sony A9.
Yes.
Now, the Sony A7 is very popular with photographers and videographers. Where does this fit in?
The Alpha 9, the proposition for this camera is very different. There's a lot of features in it, but if you wanted to summarize it, it comes down to speed. The speed part really comes from the brand new sensor that we have. It's an XMR RS sensor, 24 megapixel with stacked memory. So what it's able to do with that is captures a lot and then stores it in RAM so it can read faster and faster data. And this enables to shoot 20 frames per second at full resolution. And with that, a whole host of features as well, which number one, blackout free shooting. So you're continuously seeing the subject. And then second, and probably even more important, is silent shooting. So silent shooting, blackout free shooting at 20 frames per second.
The body, now you have 2 media card slots.
Right, so dual media card slots, people like to have backups. So if one card fails, you have another one to back up to.
Now, this is a totally redesigned battery.
Correct.
Tell me about that.
So compared to the W battery, the new Z battery has about twice the capacity of the W battery. So that extends the life so much more. But also it's redesigned because the W battery was not enough to power the brand new image sensor. So driving a 24 megapixel full frame sensor that shoots at 20 frames per second draws in a lot of power. A brand new battery was really necessary in order to achieve the camera features that we have with the Alpha 9.
Well, I appreciate Kendi for stopping by.
Thank you very much.
It's Jake from B&H. Thanks for watching.
Welcome back to the B&H live stream with the Sony A9 camera. We're streaming just about everywhere. Maybe you're finding us on Facebook, maybe you're seeing us on YouTube. We want to thank our partner Imaging Resource for helping with the stream today, and we're looking forward to getting into our conversation. So, like Kenta was talking about, the high order bid of the camera seems to be speed. And I'm curious as to how that works out for everyone in their particular discipline of photography, in their particular genre of photography.
Definitely, speed, definitely. That worked out so well for me. As you can imagine, photographing dogs, always fast moving, never, just completely unpredictable. Never know where they're gonna be and when, and I always have to be ready for that beautiful little moment. I can't tell them to go stand in the good light or to go do whatever I need them to do, so I just have to be ready at any given moment.
But they don't speak English.
They don't speak English, believe it or not. I've gotten pretty decent over the years at trying to speak dog, but for the most part, we still have a bit of a communication barrier.
You don't bark.
So these, they're showing some of the images that I shot with the A9. I booked a couple of different shoots just so I specifically could really put this camera to the test and really take it out into the natural world, and do what I would do at any normal shoot. Get in the mud, splash around in the water, just really get wild, get into the dog's world, So this is a sweet, sweet angel of a dog that I met last week. She unfortunately is super sick and doesn't have much time left on this earth. So the reason that her parents booked this shoot was, to kind of create a legacy, lasting memories that they could, kind of hang on to forever. So it was really brilliant. I was able to put her in these tulips that were bigger than her and then shoot really wide and low with the 16 to 35. And yeah, it was brilliant. It was such a great experience.
And it's fast. Now, Matt, speed is incredibly important in sports photography, but you've been shooting SLR really up to this point, working with the A9. Maybe you can talk about some of the differences moving from SLR into a mirrorless system.
Well, I usually shoot with the 5D Mark III, so having an A9 with up to 20 frames a second has changed the way I view things, to say the least. I think the 5D is 6 frames a second, which has been very good to me. But moving to something that can focus so fast and can track so well has really changed the way I view things. And the buffer is incredible. I found myself shooting so many more shots just because it can hold it,
What are we looking at here? This is some of your work from Spain?
No, this is actually at Red Bull Arena in Harrison,
here?
Little New Jersey. Yeah, I love culture. I love the culture of football. I love the fans. We call it the ultras. Before every game, there's a rally, and it's with a bunch of pyros and a bunch of smoke grenades, and it's a really big ritual when it comes to football. And this is what I live for. This is the stuff that I really get, that I love.
Does it feel different working with the smaller camera body?
Oh, definitely.
What are some of the differences for you?
Well, usually I have the 5D with a big grip, and having a camera body this small really enabled me to move more freely. Usually I'm climbing structures, sometimes trees, sometimes, bridges, and having a body this small, I can just whip out and shoot really quickly has really helped me a lot. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, size matters. Now, Sarah, you shot SLR for years on weddings, and I know you still do. But has mirrorless changed the way you approach your subjects?
It was definitely one of the biggest reasons that I wanted to look at the Sony bodies, because they were smaller and lighter. And I've been shooting weddings for 15 years and carrying around a lot of gear for 10-hour days, and it's exhausting. It's hard on your body, and so the Sony's being a little bit lighter and being smaller to handle is so great for just the female photography industry in general. I think that's definitely a lot of the appeal to start with. And then once you start using it, you see some of like all of the other things that matter. So the faster frame rate is really, really nice. Not for the whole wedding day, because I already shoot way too many images as it is, but it is really great when you're trying to capture, like with Jewish weddings, we have the breaking of the glass, or there's all of these moments where you need the bursts, and then you can go back. And I love that it's adjustable. So sometimes I'm going to go all the way up to 25 frames a second, not usually, but there's even a low speed, so you can still do a really great, like, faster shutter, but it's not 20 frames a second, and they're easy to adjust. So I really felt like this is positioned, I think, more towards sports photographers, but to be honest, I think it's really perfect for the wedding photographer. And it has so many other features that we look for in a camera as a wedding photographer, and especially as a female wedding photographer. I mean, I'm sure men look for the same things, but that's definitely something that we're noticing, the smaller size. Also, I'm sure we're going to talk about some other things, but the A7R II had this, and I think that with the A9 having the adjustable screen and being able to get down low really quickly, to get up high and shoot in positions, especially, again, as a female, I'm not a 6'5" guy who can get these different positions. So it's really nice to have that extra height.
Yeah, I'm not a 6'5" guy either. But I will say, in the photojournalism world, as it's become, just to go back to the stuff that I used to do, it still has become dangerous, and even in this country, to sort of be obviously a journalist in many instances. For me, using some of these smaller cameras, and like a really dinky camera strap, I can sort of end up looking like a tourist. And that's actually really important, because when I first started photography, I wanted to have like the biggest camera with the biggest grip and the biggest lens hood, and that just screamed like, I'm a professional photographer, and I'd wear a scarf and an eye patch and, have like a cigar coming out the side. But and now it's like I want to wear a Hawaiian shirt and like a camera around my neck and just
a fanny pack.
A fanny pack. So that's definitely it helps a lot, but the speed is so key. And one of the great things about the silence and the speed is, like, when you see shooting from inside the Oval Office, and you can hear it on TV, like every photographer just go and it's all,
right.
You don't need to do that anymore. Now you can be completely silent. Now you could photograph Tiger Woods in the backswing, where photographers were never able to shoot like the golf backswing before, and like the masters were all like waiting for right after there's a swing to start taking the pictures, and like now you can do that because it's completely silent, and that is key, even when you're doing sensitive work with in a church.
Right.
In a mosque or whatever. Yeah.
I mean, you might get invited to do different types of jobs just because of the gear that you have, because you can do certain things and not others. I mean, I do some commercial stuff as well, and I get asked certain questions like, can you send the image to your phone and send us a few previews? Like, you can do it with a Wi-Fi card, I guess, but it's not the same. I've done both. It's a lot more complicated. It doesn't work the same. It messes with the camera in some cases. We stopped using them, but with the Sony, I can easily grab a couple images. I can send previews right after an engagement session. It changes my market so much that little feature has been a huge advantage for us too.
Yeah, products are really just a stack of these small delights, these features that come together. And we, Ben and Sarah and I, were out in California last week at Condo Trip 1.0 with Sony. And just to show folks at home a little bit of how we worked out there, we have a short video. Condo Trip 1.0 day one. A phenomenal day hanging out with my good friends from B&H and everyone at Sony. First stop, the gear tent. I got to put my hands on Sony's latest and greatest, the A9, and some lenses that I hadn't put my hands on before, so that was really, really cool. First up, wildlife, something I don't get to shoot a lot of. There was a zebra. I got to photograph a zebra, which is not as hard as you would think it is to do, but photographing a zebra, collaborating with a model, it's a little bit trickier. But I did get to have a great conversation with Sara France, who's an amazing photographer. I got to make a lot of great portraits today with two of Sony's best portrait lenses, the 85 and 100mm G Master lenses. So photographed professional models, their makeup artists, folks that were working the set, Jake from B&H. It was really, really cool. Oh, also I got to make some photographs of wolves, real life wolves, and we got to pet them, and I had a great time with those guys. They were really cool. We got to shoot some awesome sports today. There were skateboarders, there were professional BMX bikers. It was a great test of the Sony A9, how the autofocus system works, how the high frame rate works. One of the things that surprised me the most, though, is that I found myself lying down in the middle of this pipe shooting skateboarders and bikers just flying over my head. And one of the best series of images that I got to make today, I was super excited about. One of the skateboarders leaned over the pipe while another boarder came and did an ollie just right over his head. And it was the coolest succession of images. Shooting all of this stuff, it can be a little bit stressful. So I went to a meditation workshop where I meditated and meditated and meditated. Alpha University was here recording interviews with Sony artisans and other participants at the Convergence. It's really, really important to make a document, I think, of the way that we make images, why we make them, and how we share them with one another. I am super pumped for tomorrow, day 2. I have to get some rest tonight because I'll be on the beach tomorrow at 5 a.m. shooting some surfing. After that, I have no idea what cool surprises Sony has in store. So see you then. I'm going to go get some rest. Condo was an incredible experience. I'm so sad to be back, guys. I don't know.
I know. I just wanted it to keep going. It was amazing.
What were some of your favorite things, Sara?
I really felt like the crew of photographers that they brought together for this event was the highlight for me. I kind of see it like a wedding where it's like this major event and people just move things around and make sure that they can be there. And so it brought together just amazing photographers who wouldn't normally get to interact and be together and learn from each other and share. So I really felt like that, and being able to share with Sony from all those different perspectives for us was just hugely valuable. And the cocktails were good too.
Oh yeah.
No, the creative collaboration and talking to everyone and kind of bouncing ideas and, seeing how people shoot. I'm not a big portrait model photographer, and seeing how people do that and learning from, that perspective is just as good as, one morning we just decided to go scuba diving, like right off the beach. It was really great to do that, and also the experimental draft lattes that they served were quite good.
It was intense.
That was great. Yeah, it was a lot of sugar.
We're well caffeinated for the time. I enjoyed, shooting the autofocus. I enjoyed shooting and getting a good sense of the autofocus for the camera, because the frame rate was really one of the high order bids. But as I started shooting, I also got to learn about the autofocus accuracy of the camera, and this was staggering to me. I don't shoot a ton of sport, and I'm sure I'll have some images that'll pop up here shortly. But I don't shoot a ton of sport, but I was in awe of how well the camera was able to track the erratic movement of the bikers and skaters.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of options for how you want, more than any other Sony camera in the past, you have a lot of options for how you want the autofocus to work.
That's
Do
right.
you want it to track across? Do you want it to track like coming towards you? Do you want that dynamic tracking where it's just center weighted? And it spreads, the autofocus kind of spreads throughout the whole frame, depending on how you set it, of the viewfinder. It's like almost like 92%.
Yeah.
Like that.
93%.
It's incredible to do that. I mean, I probably just don't even need to go out anymore. The next camera I'll just say, go take a good picture for me. And I'll just have like a cardboard cutout of me, and it'll just go out into and do it for me.
I think that was in the feedback we gave. Yeah, in the stream session.
Too good.
Yeah, the precision was there. I've always enjoyed mirrorless, like moving to phase detection in mirrorless has always been very precise, but not necessarily the fastest type of camera to use when compared to a DSLR. But I didn't have any.
Well, I think that combination between phase and contrast and how fast it is really working out. And now that they've really with this camera, it sort of has gotten rid of, it's like this step between, you know, what was done in the past and what's new. You don't need a mirror anymore. You don't need a mechanical shutter in the curtain. That's an archaic way of looking at a camera now. Now we have this new technology that is sort of revolutionizing the idea. You still have the same shape as a traditional camera, and I guess as a left-handed person, I'm a little biased that no one's ever made a left-handed camera. You know, it's made guys, modular maybe. But you know, this is, you know, a completely new technology and a new way of doing image making within the framework of the ergonomics that we're used to.
Right.
Yeah.
This was my first experience actually ever shooting mirrorless. So yeah, to have, first of all, 693 autofocus points. Yeah, I think it covers 93% of the screen. And to have these dogs kind of like jumping around, I specifically took a few dogs to a body of water so I could kind of capture them jumping around and splashing and seeing how it would pick up each little droplet of water. And it was really unbelievable. But to have that, there's no blackout in between as the mirrors, you know, there's no mirror flipping. I'm all of a sudden, I'm capturing these moments that I've never seen before. I'm used to, with the mirror, really having to time it as dogs kind of go up and down as they run. I sort of time the rhythm of my shooting to their running. And all of a sudden, I don't have to do that, and I'm not missing these little tiny moments in between anymore, and I'm capturing like the peak of the action. Well, that's very cool.
You know, that's like the ultimate thing that has always been wrong with photography, is that we've been trained to get the decisive moment. Yeah. But that decisive moment is the one we actually never get to see with our own eyes, because that's always when the mirror flipped up. That's the one we're anticipating not seeing what we want to photograph. And that doesn't exist anymore. Now you can actually see what you're trying to make an image of. And that's a big deal. And actually there's a bit of a learning curve to get used to that idea that like I'm seeing what I want to actually photograph.
Yeah. It's an incredibly satisfying feeling. Like photo for me, when I feel like something is happening right in front of me, just for me. You're riding all these waves of inertia with the subject, the background, the environment, all these things coming together. And then Ben, you're exactly right. Then you don't get to see it with a traditional SLR. So you get that gratification, just like, oh, right there, you're confident in it. Yeah.
Also, I feel like as a wedding photographer, there's so many times when I used to just not be sure if I exactly had the right exposure, but I see it right through the lens now. So what's so interesting is that my style of shooting has changed, but also I don't what they call chimp anymore. I'm not looking on the back of the camera. I'm not missing moments. I trust because I can see what I'm shooting. Going back to like a Canon at this point is really hard because my eye still thinks I'm seeing what I'm shooting. So that's been a problem. If I ever, need to go back and use somebody else's Canon or something, I'm like, mess it up. Yeah, I'm like, I don't understand. But it's a learning curve. And these are actually some shots I did when we were up at Condo. The wolf obviously was amazing. Luckily, the wolf was only afraid of men, so I was able to shoot and get really close with him.
Well, I put lip gloss on, remember? And
that worked. The heels were a nice touch. Yeah. But even with shooting some of the models, they have an eye autofocus on the Sony, which is amazing. And I didn't really understand how to use it until I went out and really shot with the A9, because just being around so many other photographers who were using it, I was used to the certain type of way I like to focus. And I tried really using the IAF, and I love it, because what I didn't understand was that I thought it was a setting and you just stay on it. And I'm like, that's not going to work for me. What if they turn away or whatever? But it's per image. So if you're capturing something and you're like, oh, I really want to lock on the eye, you just hit the little button on the back and boom, it looks for the eye.
It can be any button. One of the great things about these cameras is that every single button can be set to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
With it's almost like too many options. Like,
and they're
you
big.
can have it get
they're
your
easy
coffee
to find.
for you.
Yeah.
They are easy to find.
There's the latte maker.
They're in the right places too.
Yes.
So one of the biggest things for us is focus. If I miss focus on a shot, and I shoot really shallow most of the time, then the shot's done. So the focus on the A9 is incredible because they put the AF on the back, because I like to shoot with a thumb So focus with the thumb and shoot with the trigger.
Right.
So back button focus was huge, and it's already there. It's there. It's in the right place. Everything's already set. And then the joystick that they have on the back in order to move the focus points. And it's right next to it. So it's just, it works the way you expect it to work. I went in to change a bunch of the buttons, and I started realizing that they were already set to what I wanted. You know, I was like, this should be something else. And they're like, no, actually, it's perfect. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're right. It's
something that's great about it is that, you know, when I'm on land, I use that back button focus. But when I'm in the water, just because of the ergonomics of holding an underwater housing, I have to change my settings. So I use the shutter button to do the focus and the lock button to actually lock it, but just because of how you hold housing. And having the ability to very quickly switch between settings and save menu items now is so great, because I can now use the same camera with the same lens on land, and I could use it underwater and very quickly change my settings to work with the situations I find myself in.
Now, Matt, as a sports photographer, what are some of the features or custom things that you demand from your kit?
Well, back button focusing is like one of the most important things. If you're not a back button focusing sports photographer, I don't know if I can take you seriously.
Oh man!
But yeah, this camera.
There's a T-shirt.
Yeah, we should make that, right?
We should.
Back button or nothing.
Yeah, I have pretty big hands, so I didn't know how it would feel like holding a camera that's significantly smaller than my DSLR, but I was shocked that my thumb just like was so natural. The joystick, the back button focusing, I just was so pleased with it, and I cannot imagine going back, especially shooting the game where I had one DSLR and then the A9. I caught myself using the A9 way more because it's magical.
What was your ratio? Do you remember? I always like to ask this.
Yeah.
When you take a mirrorless on your first like working job, like
yeah. So I bought the DSLR, you know, I had a 400, and then with the A9 I had a 7200, and usually with my second body I try to shoot 1,000. I try to cap it at 1,000 because you need to get through these photos fast, like during and after the game. But with the A9, because it's so fast, the no blackout feature, I had like 4,000 shots.
I hear you. So did I.
Yeah, I mean it's really good because, like he said, that decisive moment. I got it. Like, for instance, I got a bicycle kick on camera. I've never got one of those before.
Wow.
And yeah, because it rarely happens in a game, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm happy the A9 is so light. I was like, and then I had it. And I was like, I have a bicycle kick. Wow.
Oh my God.
And I don't know if I could do that with my DSLR because my DSLR is incredibly heavy. And try to take it out and you see something happening and then you don't know if it's the right focus. The focus is so fast on this, you know?
And you can see it right then and there. You know, I think that's the biggest thing. The Finder is incredibly accurate. So, you know, even if you were doing like image review in the Finder, you don't need to use that feature because in real time you're looking. You know the exposure. You know if you got it or not.
Really, the only thing you're going to look at the back of the camera or even like review your photos for is to see, because you take images so quickly, to make sure you got that moment or that, you know, you were even shooting. But if you're shooting at 20 frames a second, you got the moment for sure.
You really did get the moment. Yeah.
Probably that moment and a few other moments.
That's true. It's like you find little surprises in there, you know, these little tiny slices of time that are so brilliant that you never would have even imagined are happening, and yet you're capturing the stuff that's happening like in real time at 1/8,000th of a second in front of you. And that's the joy of photography for me too, is just being able to gift people with those little tiny moments of things that they care about, whether it's their dog or their kid or, you know, their wedding. Or
I think even if you change it to the electronic shutter, you can go to like 1/32,000th of a second. So you can go like hummingbird's wings.
And the lack of vibration too is really incredible, because I'm used to, you know, if you're shooting so quickly, I'm used to feeling it like a machine gun almost in my hands, you know, but it's like just completely still and silent. And it's definitely took some getting used to for me, because I was so used to that feeling.
And that makes a big difference for wildlife and stuff like that as well. Like,
that
freaks animals out.
Yeah, for me, for sure. Like as much as I can minimize all that kind of scary stuff that happens, you know, in front of the dog that I'm photographing, I'm taking away kind of that big chunky sound. And some dogs are kind of like bomb-proof and they don't notice that at all. But a lot of dogs, I never know what I'm going to get until I get on site with an animal, and it's typically the first time I'm meeting them. So I don't know if they're fearful. I don't know if they have a history. You know, I don't know. A lot of times they're shelter animals. Maybe they're recently rescued. I don't know what their stories are. So to be able to take that kind of big scary piece out of it for them and be able to capture that moment as it's happening rather than them being distracted or being taken out of that moment is really something special. That was a first-time experience for me, and it was very cool.
I wanted to ask you, Kaylee, because you have longer sitting sessions with your subjects.
Yeah.
With the mirrorless, I'm assuming you're probably shooting more.
Definitely, I would say that.
How does the back end work for you with the extra files? How do you?
I mean, well, first of all, the files that come out of the Sony are definitely quite a lot bigger. And I did want to touch on actually what I found about the raw files too, but I'll get to that in a second. But yeah, so typically I kind of cull through so that I can show if I'm talking about a private photo shoot, I typically show my client about 80 photos or so from about a 2.5 to 3 hour session. So it definitely makes culling a bit of a longer process because I have so many more to choose from. However, the ones that I do have are just so special. It's kind of unreal. Like I said, I'm seeing these amazing moments that I never even sometimes was cognizant that were happening in front of me because dogs move so quickly. So I kind of have to cull through and get like about 80 of the best, which is no problem to do with this camera, to find about 80 or 90 incredible images. And honestly, probably 80 is way too many to show to a client, but
that's just 4 seconds. 4
seconds. I get so excited. I just show so many.
You definitely need more hard drives.
But when it comes to editing, I did find that the files are much, there's a lot of data hidden in them. And I actually had to, just because the A9 is so new, I had to download Capture One so that I could actually process the files. Currently, they're not being seen by Lightroom. I'm sure that'll change. So this is my first time using Capture One, but I pulled the raw files in there, and a lot of times because I kind of stop down my backgrounds and I add light in on my subject, a lot of times like the tree lines and things that are farther back, a lot of times those are really, really dark, and so I have to pull the shadows all the way up. I'm going like plus 100, to the shadows in the background and lifting the exposure like crazy. And currently I find a lot of like noise and really significant degradation in the image when I do that. But with these files, I was so surprised at how much data was like hiding in there. And so I was getting these amazing colors that were kind of hidden in these really dark, what appeared to be almost black parts of the image. So I was super pleasantly surprised to find that. And that type of editing, especially I do with the images that I've lit. So this one, for example, that's up now, these are natural light. But the ones that I kind of use like so that I strobe in on, those are the ones that I really have to pull the exposure, and I hope for this really brilliant dynamic range. And I was very pleasantly surprised.
And I think you're the only person that's gotten to use these, and you guys can correct me here, but you use these with portable strobe.
Yep, you got it.
Okay,
yeah.
So you've had a lot of experience with that. Any syncing issues? People want to know this sort of thing.
You just have to, you can't have it on the electronic shutter. That's the only thing I found so far. And then, yeah, other than that, really, that was it. I just had to make sure, it took a bit of learning to get used to just having to change the shutter. But other than that, no, I haven't found anything super different about it.
This is cool. This is cool. Now, 2 lenses popped up at Condo. The 12 to 24 f4G and the 16 to 35 f2G Master. Now, Ben, you're underwater a lot. I'm assuming you were pretty happy about having some wide options.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. The 12 to 24 is just a really great lens to use underwater or even on land if you want something like just super duper wide. I have rented a helicopter and shot over Manhattan using the 12, just hanging out the side. I've taken it to Mexico and swam with sea lions and hammerhead sharks, and just having the ability to just have this wide angle lens for the first time with the Sonys is really, really great, because especially underwater, you need that wider lens to really get life that's close to you, because after 15 feet you lose all color information. And then just on land, just having something so wide provides like such a dynamic, more interesting way of seeing the world around you. And it's just it's a real privilege. I got these lenses about a month to play around with them underwater, and it was really, really great. I mean, when you see a hammerhead coming towards you, they kind of look like a TV antenna. They're really strange creatures, and you know, it's just, you know, part of why it's great is that, like, I'm on the surface here in like 2 to 3 knots of water, and I'm being blown down a tow line across from bait, and you know, I just wanted to make sure that I could handle the camera and get back before like the hammerhead turned around. So that's sort of key, is having a smaller camera. It weighs less as I'm flopping around in the water, and all of a sudden you have a 6-foot swell and the hammerhead's like right on top of me, smiling down at me. And the way their face is shaped, it looks like it's always smiling. And I knew.
At least that's the last thing you heard. Smile. At least it was
A
smiling.
smiling antenna face coming into me, but it was really great.
Yeah.
So
And these are important lenses too, because Sarah, I know you as a wedding photographer,
Yeah.
that sort of completes that
Yeah,
setup, the 24.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think 16 to 35 2.8 has been a staple for wedding photographers for sure. A lot of times we're doing room shots, and we're doing like scene setup stuff. It's not typically used as much these days now that fisheye's kind of out.
Right.
I was around in that time.
It was fun.
And yeah, it was a phase. But now 16-35 is used for a lot of setup stuff, and it's such a sharp lens, and it really it's a beautiful. I mean, I had the Canon 16 to 35, and I eventually just kind of stopped using it. I just felt like it wasn't really as sharp as I wanted it to be, and I switched to all primes. But that 16 to 35 is really, really sharp.
Love it. Love
Yeah.
it. All right. Now, as a sports shooter, what's the glass that you're taking with you, Matt? Like, what needs to be in the bag?
At least a 300. Well, the one lens you need to have regardless is 70-200. But my favorite focal length is a 300 prime. I think it is so pleasing. The compression is phenomenal, and when it's good glass, it comes out tack sharp. And unfortunately, I didn't get to use the 300 with the A9, but I'm sure the 300 is phenomenal.
It's coming. Now, did you get to try the 100 to 400, the G Master?
No, unfortunately, I didn't. But I'm sure it's great.
I played with this one, and I was shocked at how lightweight it was for that length. Because do you remember the old push-pull Canon, that 100 to 400?
I remember that back in the days.
I really loved that lens.
Got like carpal tunnel syndrome.
Well, it felt like, especially when video came, I loved it because we would use it for
Do
that
the-
kind of
do the
70s
shocker,
crazy.
yeah.
It was really
And you were
fun
meditating
lens.
in the video.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But it was a honker. It was heavy.
Yeah.
This
No,
picking this
is
thing
great.
up is
I
like,
mean, you can actually handhold this
Yes.
lower, you know, you can. One of the things that's interesting about the mirrorless is that you can sort of, in a way, disregard those rules of like your shutter speed, you know, being less than your focal length, because you can actually handhold this at a slower speed. And that 400, I mean, even though it's 5.6 at 400, it's still super creamy. I mean, it's. I haven't used it in like a football situation where you really need to get rid of the sidelines because you're shooting on the same plane, but shooting those wolves in the field, which we all shot the wolves in the field
Those wolves.
with a 400, you know, it was super creamy in the background. The bokeh was really nice.
Well, and the Sony cameras are just
Like
like
dogs of the sea.
so amazing with handling low light situations that I feel like you can almost get away with some of those lenses that you couldn't get away with before.
Yeah, like this picture that's up right now is at like right off the beach from Condo. And, you know, we went in the morning in high tide, and it was super murky. I mean, you couldn't see anything. And just the high ISO and the lens quality and the way it's able to just absorb so much light and so much information gives you, you know, quite a robust file full of sand.
how high did you push it here? Do you remember?
You know, the light streaming in, it's probably around like 2,500. I mean, and that's like, you know, I would never do that with another camera.
Yeah.
And that is incredibly safe space for Sonys. You can go to 5,000 and that's a safe space for Sonys. And I actually think this is fairly interesting just in terms of like the history of photography and how we see is that we can now photograph in spaces and record color information that even our eyes can't. And is that artifice? Is that different? I mean, it's one of these like perennial questions that photography has in its debate with itself as a debate.
Sure.
With itself, but is this idea of photographing and capturing light and information, and then, if you're photographing a completely pitch black space, which some of the Sony cameras can do you add in contrast? Do you because our eyes don't see that at all, but now all of a sudden the camera does see what our eyes can't see.
It's pretty unbelievable, yeah.
Like we did astrophotography on that last night in Condo.
I didn't get to ask you about this.
Yeah.
How did it go? Did you get that tripod?
I got it like a little tiny tripod.
Okay.
It was like a little one of those Manfrotto like little tiny ones.
Tiny.
Tony Gale lent me.
Whatever works.
We opened it up and we went up to the half pipe and set up, and Ira Block showed me this little app that you can have augmented reality and see in real time where all the stars are, and like you set up. And I just learned about this rule that you like take 500 and divide it by your focal length, and that's how many seconds you can go without before you get star trails. Wow. So with the 12, that gives you a 40-second exposure. Actually, a 41-second exposure. Did the math really quickly just now. But it was great. And then like, you'd set up, you do this long exposure, and all of a sudden you're seeing like the Milky Way and the stars, and it's crazy. I almost would love to do that now that I'm back in the city, but I know we have so much light pollution here that it's pretty much
It's like
impossible.
all light, no stars.
No stars whatsoever.
North
It
for a
was
couple
really
hours.
cool.
Amazing.
I know. I actually started researching like the darkest places in New York, and they were like, the subway.
I feel like you have to shoot a lot of dark. You have to shoot in the dark too, because you're limiting light because you stop down your glass so much.
Yeah, exactly. And I do a lot of, not only do I like to shoot sort of the effect of midday light, kind of comic booky and bright and super colorful, like midday skies, but I also love to shoot those really dramatic sunsets, as photographers do, But I really love to push it until it's like kind of almost like the blue hour, and you get these streaks of purple and dark pink, and that's one of my favorite times to shoot, and it's highly requested by my commercial clients especially, and it's so hard to ever kind of guarantee them that we're going to get an amazing sunset or anything like that. But if I have the ability to shoot in lower light, I can kind of almost fake that. With the blue skies, you can kind of almost fake that really vibrant, incredible sky quality. So I shoot a lot in lower light, and not only that, but because dogs move so fast, I don't really ever want to be less than about 1/1000th of a second.
Wow.
It's not really like a portrait of a human where I can say, just stand there and stay still.
Right.
So I'm pretty much always at 1/1000th, unless I'm using strobes. Of course, I'm limited by the sync speed of lights, but typically natural light, I'm about 1/1000th. So if it's even getting slightly dark, it's like all of a sudden my ISOs are cranked.
What's your happy place there in the ISO?
For ISO?
Yeah.
I mean, my happy place is like, 50. But I will say I shot the action shots kind of that we showed earlier with the dogs splashing through the water. There was lots of light in the atmosphere, but I wanted to be around like 1/8000th of a second to really freeze everything into this like crystal clear kind of magical scene. So I was at, I think, about ISO 1000, and I do notice that with my DSLR. It's not a huge problem, but I noticed the grain at about 1000-ish, and I'll have to do a little noise reduction, nothing crazy, especially if I have to lift shadows out. Then in those areas, I need a little more noise reduction. But I didn't even notice it with the Sonys. It was not perceivable. Is that a word? Perceivable by my eye.
and I think that high ISO stuff is great for weddings. It's great for sports, like, shooting any sports. I mean, you don't want to drop below 250 at 500. I mean, it just depends on the sport, but like 1,000, it's like, and in the NBA, the types of strobes that you're allowed to use, like everyone has a sync speed problem, and like how powerfully you can do it. And it's so amazing that you can just go further up with these cameras. So you don't even always have to bring a strobe to a game, and you can just shoot at a really high ISO and high shutter speed.
Well, and even on the other side, I mean, we are shooting in really, really bright situations a lot of times. We're on the beach. People want these like beautiful backgrounds and to bring in all the color, and it's like it's too bright. So having the high shutter speed and being able to really still get the shallow depth of field and not have to use an ND filter is really, really nice. So that, but then on the flip side at receptions, I mean, that environment and being able to capture what it really felt like at the reception, what the lighting really was, especially because they're doing so great with lighting nowadays at receptions, where it's just beautiful and you don't want to add all this artificial light in. So some of my favorite reception shots have been more recently, and actually I think they're featuring some on the Alpha Universe site, where I was talking a little bit about shooting in low light, but it's just capturing some of these moments where people are having these beautiful scenery that we just couldn't even do before. And even if you're using a tripod, you get a lot of movement with people in it and everything. And now we add maybe a little bit of video light to bring focus, and that's it. So great. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to pose this to everybody, and maybe we'll start with you, Matt. Like, electronic shutter is now a thing. I've been terrified of electronic shutter because, like, my initial test with it with other cameras was I would get like the smeary kind of jello-y effect, and I was curious to know like how everybody felt about this working the camera over, but I wasn't able to. I didn't see that smear out of the A9, and I think that goes to the stack processor. But as a sports photographer, you know, you'd benefit from going above an 8,000th of a second using the electronic shutter.
The electronic shutter, I noticed no difference besides the fact that there was no mirror in front of it, you know? I really do like it, and I really could not find anything wrong with it at all. I mean,
did the sound throw you off for a minute? Like, not hearing?
It's like a chirp.
I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah, it's like a chirp.
You can set the fake sound.
I like the fake sound. I had the fake sound for a while.
I had to put the fake sound on because when I first got it, I would like accidentally hold the shutter down, and you would not. You
like 8 million.
You didn't even notice.
I'm just waiting for when we can download like iTunes ringtone sounds or something. That you just have like your own tone for your thing.
It's like the GPS where you change the.
I think it's, you know, with some of the past mirrorless cameras across the spectrum of brands, you know, the problem with electronic shutter was banding with certain frequencies of halogen lights and stuff like that, and they've really worked on solving that problem, which is also really, really key because, like, you know, you don't want to like be in a stadium that has big LED lights and then also sodium vapor lights and all this stuff, and all of a sudden like half your screen is green and the rest of it's purple, and they've really worked on fixing that as well with the electronic shutter, and having the options where you can set, you know, I want to be on electronic shutter right now, or I want to be on the mechanical shutter, you know, for various reasons. There are lots of reasons to do both. Like, it's easier to do that now, so you don't have to do it on auto. You can just say, now this.
Kaylee, I mentioned you're jumping back and forth quite a bit, like from syncing and.
Yeah, the only reason that I really changed to mechanical was because of the light. I had to, you know, in order to use the strobes, you have to be on mechanical. At least that's what I found. I could be wrong about that, but that's what I found is I had to change it over to mechanical for that. But when I was on electronic, I definitely had at times I shut off the sound if I was working really close range with the dog, like when I'm shooting at 16 millimeters and I'm super close to them, I shut the sound off. But other than that, it's like almost the nostalgia of the sound, you know? It's like, I need this sound because it makes me realize when I have clicked the shutter and when I have made an image, and it's maybe just something that eventually, like, you know, I would be comfortable with and grow out of. But I love that they have the option to turn the sound on.
Yeah.
The first time I shot with it, I literally didn't realize I was taking. Yeah. I was like, I kind of like looked around, like, what was that?
It's so silent.
It's
like
amazing.
We talked about this earlier, like with the haptic feedback with like a DSLR. You can like feel like the shutter like clap, you know. But with this, you could just accidentally be holding it down. It's 20 frames a second. You take
fill your card up.
80 photos. You take 80 photos and you're like, wait a second, this is like my hand.
I wound up with a lot of pictures of like my foot. Accidentally like a pipe. There's like all these skateboarding images.
But just think how like that's gonna change with like certain types of sports or being in the White House and being in these moments, like, you know, really sensitive moments where, as a photojournalist, as documentarian, someone doing weddings, you know, it's like where you have these like key moments that you don't want to intrude on, but you need to capture. You can do that in a really unique way now that you really couldn't do before. And not only do you can put the camera at a different angle, you could change the viewfinder, and you can really work on trying to remain part of the tapestry of the background in order to really document, you know, that's your job. You're there to capture this moment, and now you have a tool that can help you do that more efficiently.
We haven't even talked about the dual SD slots either, which I think is like
huge.
A lifesaver for us. For us with wedding photography, running two 2 card slots and doing raw to both and having that immediate backup is just, it makes me feel so much happier.
That's your system, raw to both cards.
Raw to both, yeah. And it's amazing. I definitely noticed the difference on this too of I didn't hit the buffer once. And that's crazy because we're now 20 frames a second.
Right.
And I just felt like, oh man, this is going to be even harder because hitting the buffers, obviously it's game stopper. That's where you don't want to be. But I think it's something like 363 shots
Something
before
crazy,
you hit the buffer.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, that's
I couldn't
amazing.
feel it. I tried.
Me too.
And I couldn't
Yeah.
feel it. Did anybody?
I didn't feel it, but
The buffer?
Yeah. Anybody
Yeah.
feel it?
no.
Nope.
You feel that
No.
before. You're spraying and praying. But it's so funny. This camera has like really changed the way that I shoot because like it's like all anticipatory. You need to like anticipate action, and with this, it's like over and over. And there's so many times in big games where I feel the buffer,
Yeah.
and it's like
And then you're like left with that
Yeah.
where it's like,
Yeah.
okay, the
Yeah.
camera, it's just had a bad day. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm taking a pause now
Yeah.
for 1 minute. And then
Exactly.
that's when
That's when the
something
something
happens.
Yep.
yes, the most
Always
important
wanna
You get
thing.
that phone call. Did you get it? Be like,
You're like I kind of got
I
it.
got the side of it.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
but
not anymore.
Not anymore.
that buffer's
Yeah.
massive.
Man. Well, I'm a bit of a curmudgeon, and I want to just admit this to everyone. I've never been big on the
Buffer?
flip out screen.
Oh.
Really?
Yeah, it's
Never, but I used
know-
it like crazy
Yeah.
this go around.
I honestly think that the idea of the flip out screen has really changed the visual sophistication of everyone.
Yes.
Because, in the past, we hold that camera up and we, just use our dominant eye.
Right.
And you're shooting without depth perception. And you're going to this 2D world to 2D world. And now all of a sudden we're shooting, you can shoot with both your eyes open and you're experiencing the world in 3 dimension and composing that way and then photographing with depth perception into a 2D world. And I think that is going to fundamentally shift how people perceive and compose and photograph. I think it's really, really interesting.
And you're not sacrificing anything. With the DSLR, if you're invoking like live view and raising the mirror, you're kind of giving up some speed for focus. But this, you're really not giving up anything. You're getting
No.
exactly
No.
that
Zero.
benefit.
Yeah.
And for me,
experience.
when I photograph dogs, I have to be like in their world. And so when I teach workshops and kind of do mentorships, I always tell people the first thing you need to do is lay on your stomach. And I'm laying typically in the mud and kind of cranking my neck up. And what's so cool about this is I can shoot kind of on live view with the screen on, and I can flip it up, and all of a sudden I don't have to lay down. And I mean, I still love to do it because I love to interact with the dogs that way, but it was really amazing. I mean, because usually I'm shooting wide and low, so the camera is on the ground, kind of like in the dirt, and here's this little screen. I could just glance at it.
It's really hard
So
to
cool.
lie down
Yeah.
and look in a
You
camera.
have to roll your eye up.
Yeah.
Breathe. And it's hard to
Yeah,
That's
my
like
neck,
a
my
massage
eyes.
hour later
Seriously.
on.
Yeah.
And it's even harder to get taller. Like,
Yeah,
then
right.
you need something to stand on.
Yeah.
And you
Exactly.
need, it's
It
like.
works both ways.
Yeah, it
exactly.
does, definitely. And I think even to your point, like with dogs, then what if they're like, oh, they're playing with you and then they decide to go over there. And now you're like, okay, I got to get up. I got to move.
Exactly.
And now I got to run somewhere.
And keeping your eye contact with dogs is so important because the second you disconnect from them and put your eye behind the viewfinder, typically they're like over it and they're done because they're such social creatures. So a lot of times I find as soon as I look through the camera, they just peace out. So it's like
yeah.
so nice to be able to
Tape
just,
like a bacon bit to the front.
yes.
I
And
bet.
peanut butter, lots
Peanut
of
butter
peanut butter.
crack, peanut
All
butter
over the lens.
Tape bacon
You could
bits
just
for
lick
my
this
kids.
side
Good
of the
thing it's
lens
weather
right here. It'd be
season.
great.
Smear bacon all over it.
Oh, boy. Well, we have a bunch of questions that are coming in from the Twitterverse now.
We have a bunch
Oh,
of answers.
yay.
All right,
I
we
like it.
ready to jump in,
Let's
folks?
make it happen.
All right,
Let's do it.
first up,
Yes.
coming
And no.
from an EFS EF mount, the Canon, what is your recommended Sony E-mount first lens for landscape with the A9? This is a question from @DanLefebvre. So a good recommendation for a first E-mount lens for landscape with the A9.
I mean, I think if you're going to go for a general good first lens, like that 24 to 70 covers everything. But usually landscape wants something a little wider,
Wider, yeah.
whether it's a 12 to 24 or the 16 to 35. Or trying out different lenses. The 16 to 35 f4, which has been out for a long time, is an amazing lens. And I've actually used that with like great whites underwater. I've used that on land. So that covers the gambit, of having a wider kind of landscape space.
And both of those are sharp, like the 12-24, the 16-35. One thing that I noticed about them, in at least the images that I shot, was usually with the lens that wide, you're getting sharpness right in the center, and you're getting more fall off as you go to the corner. And in terms of sharpness, I was happy.
Yeah.
You know, even shooting
it's great.
open, I was like, ooh, that's pretty sharp. So I think, you know, your mileage varies, but I think those would be my two, the 12-24, 16-35.
One of the interesting things about the 12-24, it doesn't have a thread. So you can't put filters on it, but it is all internal zoom. So you're not getting that effect of the lens going in and out, which changes your balance when you put that camera on a tripod.
All right, we got a technical question coming in here from _ Leo Rawl. Does it record 20 frames per second while saving a RAW and JPEG file to each memory card slot?
Yes.
If you want it to.
If you want it to.
I think you can set it however you want it. Yeah.
Or go ahead, sir.
Or dual RAW.
Or dual RAW, yeah.
Or do JPEG.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're inclined
What do you
to
want?
go that route. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've all thrown whatever we can at this thing. And it writes efficiently. You want to make sure that you're using fast
cards.
Use H2 cards. Yeah, that's the biggest thing. That really to me that's going to be.
And
the
I think
only
one
limitation.
slot takes a slightly faster card. And
That's
one,
right.
You know, the new Sony
the UHS2
gazillion bit.
Yeah.
Trigamillion.
Which I just heard is
it actually
started.
records your picture before you take it.
It's
does
just
all the work
started
for you
shipping
already.
from B&H.
Yeah.
I haven't
New
even
one.
gotten to use one yet. I'm so excited.
Nice
haven't-
B&H
I need
slide
that.
on that one.
Thank you.
All right. See, is the Sony A9 good for wedding photographers?
Yeah.
Shooting high quality photos,
wonder.
videos. This is a good question though, Sarah. Video is brought up here.
Okay.
Low light performance, fast change batteries, lenses, etc.
Yes. Okay. So a couple things I noticed from my videographer friends I shoot with who also shoot Sony, the battery life, huge difference.
Yes,
I mean, I see them with the A7R II, like plugging batteries into the sidewalls and you know just making sure they have plenty. But this battery life is extremely better. I also noticed they moved and made it a lot easier to start video. So there's a button on the back that just starts video. It's right next to autofocus.
Right here.
Yes, excellent. Thank you, Vanna.
Yes.
And then I think the low light quality is still amazing. The autofocus is
Spot on.
spot on and so easy to get to. So I think for photo and video, it's an incredible camera. It's better than any camera that's on the market, in my opinion. And I think it's not only great for sports, which how they've positioned it, but to be honest, I think it's the best camera out there for weddings right now, video and
it shoots
stills.
4K video, it shoots True HD, and you have
can do both,
you know, a
too.
couple of different options for frame rates and stuff like that. So it's
Well, this is a question that I've actually gotten a lot. Is it worth it to switch from the Sony A7R to the A9? Anybody want to jump in on this one? I have some thoughts.
yeah, I think they're two different cameras.
Yeah.
I'm going to be using an A9, and I'm also going to be using my A7R II. Like I think they serve two different purposes, and they feel different, and you have different types of files, and it really depends what you're after. And there's no reason you can't have one on one shoulder and one on the other. I think you'll have to have some presets in Photoshop to deal with sizing and stuff like that. But they're different cameras for different things. When you want something faster, when you know there's that need for that, versus if you're shooting something that's super big and super glossy, then maybe you might need that A7R II for something that's like you need a ginormous file. I've found that like a 42 megapixel file, a newspaper client doesn't really need that. So it just, you know, it depends on your needs ultimately.
And they can be complementary. Like I imagine you can speak to this, Sarah. Like in the realm of weddings, there's probably some portraits that would benefit from a higher resolution sensor, and then documentary work. You don't need like 40 plus megapixels. For
we haven't actually talked about the size of the image very much, but I really appreciate that it's a smaller file size, because for us, we were just going through cards really quickly, filling up our hard drives really quickly, and I didn't feel like we needed it as much. But I do feel like there's probably a lot of advantages. I don't shoot video, so I do know there's a lot of advantages for the videographers with the A7S2. And that may still absolutely be the best camera out there for video. But I still feel like the file size on this is way better for me as a still photographer and shooting weddings. If I was shooting commercial job, I might want the A7R II if it was something that was going to be like a much larger image.
All right. Okay, so what about rolling shutter in the A9? Has it become better? In the A6500, it was not so good. I think we've talked about this a little bit, but I wasn't able to find any kind of rolling shutter in still photography. I wasn't able to find that kind of jello-y
we weren't like hanging the camera off a car and then chasing another car,
Right.
where you really see that perpendicular sort of rolling shutter effect. I actually have shot a lot of video on the A63 and the A65, and I've been amazed at what those little cameras can do. This wouldn't be my first camera to do like a full-length feature film. I still think I'd probably rely on the A7R II with like an Atmos or attachment that you can put a LUT on your S-Log and kind of get your own effect. You could still do it on this one, but I think that this is great for the journalist or the wedding photographer or someone who's running and gunning who needs to do both stills and video at the same time from the hip. This is a great camera for doing that.
Great. All right, so this is a big one. All right. Will mirror DSLR cameras have a purpose in the eyes of Sony in the future, or is this the beginning of the end of the SLR? Wow, this is a big question.
Deep.
That's so deep.
We'd have to ask
Sony.
the focus groups about that one. But we always had a mirror because the technology made us need it. Like that was what we needed. We needed a mirror to flip up, and then the curtain went up, and then the light hit the film plane. So that was a technology in the creation of the camera. And we don't necessarily need that mirror anymore because the technology has moved beyond, in the same way where like you can have a Tesla now. You don't have to have a gas guzzling car, and now cars are parking themselves, right? So maybe we won't have to take parallel parking. My kids won't have to take a parallel parking on their driving test in 10 years.
Right.
So 10 years, oh my God! But
It's coming, man.
So maybe we just don't need mirrors anymore. We don't need them, and we can save them for bathrooms.
I think like as we roll through time, in life, we have to go through these like uncomfortable changes. If you think back to when, like Motorola Razr was the phone to have, everybody had that phone. And then I worked for Apple for a long time, and, starting off with the first iPhone, like remembering the size and shape of that and how much America loved that. And then all of a sudden, it moves and changes every few years. And, you still have people who do shoot film, but you kind of look back at the photography, industry and how things have changed. And it's really important to be able to roll with the changes. And I know it's easy to get like romantic and get stuck on the old
Nostalgia.
stuff. And like I said, for me, like even with the electronic shutter not making a noise, it's the nostalgia of like needing to hear that shutter sound. But I think it's important to try to kind of always look forward, and if you can kind of roll with it, just like with photographers on social media and people who really embrace that, the kind of new wave of communicating with your clients they're finding so much success over the people who might be like, no, that's crazy, that's new, that's too weird and uncomfortable. Yeah. So I think it's important to kind of keep that philosophy in mind too.
Yeah, and just imagine new people, young people coming into photography who never, like if my kids who are very young start shooting, but anyone who's in like middle school or high school, right? They might not have ever shot film, and they're coming. They might not learn the same ideas. Like when I started learning photography, I knew what the exposure of my hand was in every given lighting situation. Those kind of things don't change, but I think there's going to be a certain different type of appreciation because the technology is different, and it's going to let people to reach beyond, the image making that we've done in the past, and that helps evolve photography. It helps evolve art. And if anything, we don't be stuck in the past. No one paints like Michelangelo right now. because I mean he was awesome, but you know, but also because he did it already, right? And so people try to move beyond that and say like, well, I'm gonna go this way. Like, you know, Picasso's first work was realism, and then he was like, okay, I did that, now I'm gonna do this. And so, you know, why am I comparing myself to that? But you know, just this idea that like, you know, people can move beyond that and start saying, okay, I don't have to be hankered down by these ideas of like what photography was in the past, of what it was like to shoot film, of what it was like to use a mirror, and say, you know what, this is this new thing, and this is what it brings to the table, and image making can evolve.
Yeah, I mean, after shooting with this camera, it made going back to a DSLR so hard. The no blackout feature was like one of the biggest things for me. I finally got a bicycle kick, and having the frames per second that fast, and having the AF that responsive, and it's so smart. Soccer players don't move just laterally; they move all directions, you know. And this camera just tracks it so well, and it's so smart. Like someone can walk in front of the lens, a substitute or a referee, and the camera is like, oh, I'm not going to focus on that. I'll still focus on the player. Just let him get out the frame. And shooting a DSLR with a mirror, it seems like almost like prehistoric. I mean, I still love my 5D, but this camera has really started to like change the way I view cameras and the way I shoot soccer games. You know, it's given me like a new lease. You know,
I think it's always easy to predict the death of whatever the standard technology is, but I think about it like this: it's a wonderful time to be a photographer because there's just so many ways to make an image now. Like, you know,
so many people are interested in images, and like we're all, it's so accessible, and people have been really, you know, I think a lot of people have like seen like Instagram and the fact that everyone has a camera in their back pocket as being like the death of photography, or you know how in the last 15 years we've gone in the West specifically seeing 1,000 images a day to now we see like 5,000 images a day on average as being bad for photography. But I mean maybe it's bad to make money through photography in the sense that like it's harder to get jobs. But you know, this idea that people are basking in being part of this giant community of sharing their life, of sharing images, of having like a more robust visual vocabulary, and is key, and that helps all of us be able to communicate. And you know, ultimately, photography is about recording the world around you, or making images and self-expression. And now we have more tools and to be able to do that more effectively. Like we're limited only by our creativity.
Yeah, like I started shooting 35mm film with a single lens reflex camera, but then discovered rangefinder, which was not the way that working photographers were. That was not a system for folks, but I get great enjoyment making a photograph with a rangefinder or with a TLR or with the A9. So I think it's another way. I don't think the DSLR is dead. I think it would be too for me. I think it's. I don't think it's gone.
It has its place.
It has its place, and there's a lot of them out there.
Yeah.
So I think they'll be around.
The problem is that every time I pick up, I have this very old Nikon F3 that I shot like my first assignment on, and I put a roll of film in it, like some old expired Fuji Press 800, which was like pre-film, when you were in the newspaper back in 2000. And I'm about to take a picture of my kids, and I'm like, why? I'm never gonna develop this, like ever. And I put it back, and
yeah,
I know, right?
Oh man,
it definitely. I think that there's always going to be a place for whatever tool you want to use, and I think it's been interesting how many people went to digital, and then how there's kind of this little group going back to film. So almost to segment themselves or be unique and be different, So I think there's always going to be a place for it, but we don't need to be afraid of what's coming next. Right. I think that embracing what's coming next is another part of the expression, another way to tell a story, and just another amazing thing depending on the kind of image you want to produce and what you want to use to produce it.
I love it. And I'm pointing you out for this one, Matt, because I know that you're able to split your brain because you still shoot a pretty good amount of medium format film. Is that right?
Yeah. I love film. I started out in film. I didn't want to go to digital. I was like, no. I'm going to stay true to the roots of photography.
Wow.
I'm going to get a light meet. I'm going to do it. And then when I started to get into digital, I was like, oh, I can get these really, really fast.
Yeah,
you know, I can really call these, I can edit these really fast. And then film became more of like a personal thing. And
You know they make film emulator programs. turn your digital files, give it a grain, and make it look like you shot it with Tri-X.
Yeah, but that grain is not. It's not the same, you know.
Right.
The grain on film is so wholesome, it's so nostalgic, and then you put like a filter on, you're like, oh,
That's a
it's
filter.
Instagram, you know. But yeah, I love it.
Well, we live in nostalgic times.
That's
We
true.
do.
That's
we
true.
do.
Question for you, Kaylee.
Sure.
All right, so we know that the Sony A9 shoots 20 frames per second, but how does the focus speed match up to the crazy pups causing chaos?
The focus speed.
That actual question.
I love
It's an
it.
Yeah,
actual
I
question.
love it. I love it. Thank you
This
for
is
that
from
question.
Photography.
Who doesn't love pups?
Photography.
Photography.
That's a cute name.
I like that handle.
Yeah. Oh, I know him. He's so fantastic. He's so wonderful. He's from New Zealand, and he's like the greatest accent in the world. Hi, Greg. But anyways, yeah, the focus speed was really incredible. I had it kind of on a zone focus, especially when I was doing dogs running out of the water, kind of splashing around like crazy. And it was amazing to see all these little tiny pinpoints light up like fireworks as the dog was running out. And they're constantly changing with the splashes, with the dog's face as he turns, as he goes this way, as Stick's flying this way, he's going this way, and everything's lighting up like glittery little fireflies. And it was really amazing. I don't typically get to see the focus points as they're working. And it was really amazing to see them in the electronic viewfinder just kind of sparkling around everywhere. But yeah, it kept up really, really well. I would say, I mean, upon reviewing, and it was a lot of photos to review, 8 out of 10 anyway were totally in focus, super sharp. I think the way that I was shooting, especially in the water, some of the splashes were confusing the autofocus a little bit. And this is also possibly a user error because I didn't have it on a specific case. And I know, like, as you were mentioning earlier, there's lots of different cases you can kind of set the focus mode on. But
Water dog.
Yeah, it was the water dog one.
Water dog case.
Oh, that'll be brilliant. One day we'll get there.
Talk to the engineers.
So it was kind of following the water,
do it.
but it was amazing how many were sharp. Quite a lot of usable images, which is why it took me like hours to call through.
Right. And I think there's kind of the asterisk there that 20 frames per second, that's 20 frames per second if you've parked focus or if you're in a manual focus setting, it'll get to that. But shooting with the autofocus tracking working, I was getting like 12 to 15 frames.
It's
per
very hard to
second.
count.
Yeah.
when
Yeah,
it's
I was
silent.
like-
You know.
Imperceptible.
Word one. You're like, how do you count that?
This was the nerdy thing. I was like
Right.
going through my
On the
data and I was
path.
like, did
Yeah.
this,
Okay,
do
okay.
this, did this.
I mean,
On the back end.
One thing that I found like really incredible is with my DSLR, if it's tracking the focus and it happens to leave the focus, it's not focused on that subject anymore. It's like you have like 5-6 frames that are like very badly out of focus. And with the Sony camera, you're shooting it and every single frame is in focus. And if one frame is out of focus, the next frame is literally back in super sharp focus. And that's something that is so refreshing and so incredible to use.
It doesn't have like a long hunt.
No.
You know, like sometimes,
Right.
sometimes when the camera misses, on most cameras, like it'll do the long hunt of going
Yeah.
through the entire range. I feel like with the A9, it goes on a short hunt. It's like you miss it, and then it just does, a couple of millimeters front and back of like trying to find the focus point. So it's
That's why I think it's so smart. It's so incredible to have a camera that this powerful and this small of a body and this light. You know, you can just like whip it and just it's incredible. And with, like the screen, the articulating screen. I never in a million years as a sports photographer think I would be using that. But there's like little like niche shots that I can use it with, like a corner kick. I can get really low, something, and I was not going to get on my stomach for at a soccer game. That would look foolish. But having just
do it.
But having
that guy. Having that guy.
next game, look at me for a corner
right.
kick, But and even for like a march, I can hold the camera on top of me, and instead of just shooting and hoping that it looks
Right.
like an angry village, you can hold the camera on top of you and look at the screen and really compose a shot. And it's gonna make going back to my DSLR so hard.
No more spraying.
I should probably
Yeah.
trade it in.
It's-
And I'm just saying, I'm not,
Trade it.
At
I'm
B&H.
not trying to push it. At B&H, perhaps.
Hey,
I know a place.
Well, we have a few more questions here. Let's see. Would this be a good gift choice for my husband who is a sports photographer?
I think yes.
I love
This
you
might
for
be
it.
a great gift
Wow.
choice for your
Depends
husband.
on
who's-
your
are
income
you?
level.
Yeah.
Who
are
no, but definitely if he's a photographer, that's a tax deduction, I guess.
Right? That's-
Need those.
Make
Need
sure
those,
it's on the
make sure you run an
business
effective
account.
business there.
If I got that as a gift, I'd be very happy.
Yeah.
My birthday's coming up soon.
Oh,
just-
okay. All right. Putting that out
Putting
there,
it out
Matt.
to
I
all
like
your
that.
family and
I like
friends.
that.
Let's hope.
Just
let's
in
hope.
case you're wondering.
Yeah, an A9.
I am not a sports photographer. I would love for this to be a gift for me. So it's very, very
Speaking to a
nice.
special someone over the B&H live stream.
Okay, how is the ISO and overall low light sensitivity on the A9 compared to the A7S?
Ooh, that is a good question. I know that a couple of Sony folks did a test right before Condo, and they actually believed in their non-scientific approach to doing this that the A9 has better low light capability than the A7S.
Wow.
I didn't test it fully to the whole thing, the whole smorgasbord of ISO-ness. I just wanted to throw that.
I like
That's
that.
a technical
I like
term.
That's a great one.
Smorgasbordness, yes.
T-shirt time.
T-shirt time. We got a few on this
Yes.
one. But I definitely, pumped it up there to do some astrophotography, and I think quite a few people did, and it handled it spectacularly. So I can't imagine going up to 250,000 ISO. Like there's not a reason
Yeah,
to
yeah.
do that particularly, but
Yeah.
you can. I think in the levels that I took it up, 10,000, no discernible grain in what I was trying to do.
Yeah.
So.
That's
Yeah.
unreal.
I mean, with sports, I'm constantly going to like 32, 6400,
Yeah.
and there's literally no noise. Well, there's a little noise, but it's so you can't
slight
notice it.
chroma
Yeah,
noise, yeah.
And then having something this powerful, like when you're shooting a night game, you're constantly on the edge of like, oh, I really want to freeze this motion, but I want to keep the ISO down because I don't want it to be grainy or anything. But with this camera, you can just throw it up there, and it's incredible,
I didn't feel like the noise looked very like digital either
Yeah.
on
No.
this camera.
Yeah,
like
it's very organic,
Yeah.
almost filmic, especially with the
right.
black. When I converted over to black and white, I was seeing that. I was like, oh, this is very pleasing.
yeah, I know. I actually don't convert to black and white very much, and I tried it with this, and I loved it. Like the black and whites looked really, just had a nice depth to them too. Just beautiful. They had like a lot of dynamic range in these images, and I think that's something we've all wanted more and more and more in digital is just more dynamic range.
Yeah, and that translates for you, Sarah, in the physical product for like a wedding client, because it's not just an image that's going to be on someone's phone or put out in the thank you email blast or anything like that. You make the photograph into an object.
Right.
So how does that dynamic range play into some of the product that you deliver?
Absolutely. I think when you see something printed, it's a totally different world, and we go through a completely different process for printing our albums, where all the images go through another adjustment to make sure that they're ready to go for print. And we're looking for that. That's what we want. We want the dynamic range. We want the detail. We want to make sure all those little things that you wouldn't notice on your iPhone, you're going to see them when they're printed. So it's really, really important that everything's text sharp, that everything that the color looks beautiful, that the skin looks natural. And I know you guys rolled through some images earlier that I shot at Condo, but if you go back through if there's a shot with one of the models, he has these like ice blue eyes. But what I kept noticing when I was doing the adjustment on the image was that his skin, I could see everything, but it was like it looked really good and really, really natural. So it wasn't like over emphasizing any like blemishes on his skin. It just looked very natural, but it didn't look like flawless. It wasn't trying to make it what it wasn't. It was perfect. So
I didn't realize you were looking so closely at my face.
it was that photo.
Yeah,
So just so you know,
I
the
just
ice
didn't
green
realize.
green
Yeah,
eyes.
Yeah, there's enough like nuance. There's a lot of nuance in the portraits I think that we made. The detail it's there, but it's not overly aggressive. I mean, you could push a file that way, but straight out of the camera. And I know there are folks that are out there that might be interested in this. The JPEG engine in the camera is very, very good. So, if you are shooting something like sport, or you had something that you really needed to turn around very, very quickly, I think the JPEG engine in the camera is...
Well,
and just like you have that raw, and you can also shoot raw JPEG, and you can send the JPEG to your phone. And if you need, to work on something right away and get it to a client, you can do that on your phone. get it to them, and then also separately have the raw file and do what you need to it later on. So you have numerous options.
Right. I just posted a couple images on Instagram. I was shooting Sunday night, flying here first thing in the morning. My images went straight to the studio so that they could process them. So all I had were the downloads that I took onto my phone, you know. And I pulled up the image, went to go do some adjustments, and I'm like, this image is perfect. Like, I literally didn't want to touch it. And so I was really impressed with the fact that there was nothing I needed to do to adjust it. One, because for one, it was perfect because I could see it as I was shooting it, so I knew it was exposed properly. There was no guessing, so that makes it easier. I think for new photographers coming into the market, it's so much easier for them, right? Like with a camera like this,
yes,
as an intro camera, it just got easier and easier. It was like film was, okay, you won't know what you got for sure until you develop it. If they process it correctly, then it was like, okay, well, you can chimp, look on the back of the camera, but maybe the adjustment on the back isn't quite right. So now you see it as you're shooting, and that helps a ton. But also just the quality that's coming out of this camera allows me to share it on social media right away and not even really need to do adjustments if I don't want to.
Yeah, you can just get right into the thing, just focus on the values of the shot. You know, the basics, the composition, the way lines are coming together or breaking apart, the color meaning, it's all right there. You can see it in the Finder, and the JPEG engine is very good. I don't think no one talks about that enough, so I wanted to mention that.
And you know, and also there's great little options because you have a live view, is that you can have a level, you can have a grid, you can have the histogram live as you shoot, which you can't do with traditional DSLRs.
Yeah.
All right, so let's grab another question here. Will the Sony A9 autofocus track subjects as they pass behind stuff, as in wildlife behind tree limbs or backs through players? It's a good one for you, Matt.
I think I answered this.
Yeah.
But yeah, the autofocus system is so intelligent. It knows to stay on the subject even if there's things in front. I included a shot in the portfolio where I'm shooting through like two people, and the autofocus is so smart. It just tracked the player so well. So yeah, I can definitely handle that.
That's awesome. All right, well, one question that I wanted to pose to everyone here, because we have this is a rare opportunity to get this level of professional photographers sitting on panel, and two, the diversity of the type of work that you all make. I wanted to ask, what are the most important features for you in the A9 that help you with your work in terms of storytelling, image making, delivery to client? What are the big ones that jump out at you? And Sarah, maybe we can start with you, and we'll work our way down the line.
So the big ones for me, which I've talked about quite a bit, but the focusing, being able to focus, reposition quickly, set some of the custom focus. Also the IAF, especially for us as wedding photographers, like the IAF being able to lock on somebody's eye quickly. But really, the screen being able to flex has been a huge thing for a game changer. Being able to see what you're shooting right through the viewfinder has been huge for us as well.
Follow-up for you on the IAF.
Yeah.
Where do you customize it?
So Banna, will you hand me the, thank you.
Let's have it on this one. I will take the lens cap off for
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Ben.
So I actually program it here on this button in the center because I really like how my hand is positioned. So I can be using back button focus. I can quickly reposition here, and then I can just hit the eye. So it's all right there, and it's really intuitive. I think especially when you're switching gear, if you're going from like Nikon or Canon and coming to a new camera body, your brain needs to be able to attach to these things easily. It's really, really challenging anyways to retrain yourself because it just becomes second nature. But I think it was so easy on this camera particularly to make that adjustment that it felt very intuitive. And I know that's got to be so hard to do and create for them, but that's one of my favorite things about this camera. I also really like that it's light, especially because I'm carrying a lot of gear all day long for, 10-hour weddings plus engagement sessions. We're crawling all over rocks and crazy places. It's important to me that it is light and easy to use. And everything feels really easy to get to. I like that there's a lot of custom functions, so I can set things up in particular the way that I want them. This button we talked about a little bit that was kind of an interesting thing. The lenses have a button, and you can customize this button as well.
All the G Masters have this button.
Yes.
I love
this.
this.
Great one. Like that's what I use for my IAF.
Yeah.
For just that extra little button, and then all of a sudden it's grabbing on people's eyes.
Right. And you can use it on both.
Yeah.
You can
use it. I mean, you could have it do, send to smartphone. I don't, like
you can. You can program it to send to smarphone.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You have those options.
I definitely thought about making that my custom 3. Because I use that quite a bit, but it actually is really easy to get to in menus. I don't know if we talked about this, but the menu system is a lot
simpler.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to navigate through and get through. So those are kind of some of my favorite features as a wedding photographer. Battery life for the camera is really important. Dual slot.
Ah, yes. Huge.
Dual slot, yeah. Having both SDs in there. And I actually like that they're SDs. They're small and a lot easier to kind of manage. So.
And they're fast. So they're fast
they
enough
are
now.
fast,
So
yeah.
that's good.
2,000,
They didn't used to be.
3,000.
No, they did not.
No, that used to be an issue, but not anymore.
What about you, Ben?
I mean, they're obviously a camera's a camera, and there are a lot of cameras that are out there, and ultimately it's just about taking pictures. But for me, it's about easy use. Easy use and ergonomics. One of the things, this is a little bit chunkier here on the handhold, and for me, where I usually have 2 bodies, let's say I have a longer glass, I want to kind of bring it up like this. And so all of that's coming out in my wrist and my pinky, and having that leverage to kind of lift the camera up with longer glass, and having that ergonomic curve here, which a lot of the earlier Sony cameras didn't have, where I don't feel that like now the lens is pulling down on the mount, that it's going to like rip it out. And you have the ability to do that. That to me is key, which we didn't have before, is that ergonomics. Ease of use, being able to just quickly turn it on, make an image. Wake it up from its rest mode. I tend to keep my camera on and just have it at rest, and then be able to make an image right away. Just wake it, shoot. That's key. The battery lasts a really long time, and it lasts a long time in cold, which is really good. In the past, like I've been in Iceland. I've been down by all the way in southern Chile, down by Antarctica, and I would sleep with my batteries. Like we'd have a really nice, I'd be the big spoon, and the batteries would be here, and I'd just be keeping
You had to
them,
do it, man.
That's keeping them warm at night to, make sure they work the next day, especially if you're in a tent and stuff like that. And these batteries last, and that's a great thing.
That's awesome. All right. Kaylee,
Oh,
for
it's-
you,
it's like-
passing
it's
the
like
camera.
yeah.
But I put the lens
I
cap
love
back
it.
on,
Thank
so I don't
you.
know if,
It's brilliant. I know we've been really like harping on the speed of this thing, but that's for a reason, because it's just unbelievably fast and accurate. And so for me, as you can assume, again, I've mentioned it, with dogs kind of sporadically, wildly running all over the place, and that's the stuff that I don't want to quell. I love to capture those moments. I don't want to make them sit and stay and pose. I want that candid beauty of a dog and that whimsical spirit. And so I love the ability to just know that I have a tool in my hand that is more than capable of capturing that. For me, the articulating screen is huge as well, just because of like the angles that I shoot at typically. Like I said, lots of lying on my stomach. So and I actually get really bad migraines that have invented themselves in my body since I became a photographer, which really stinks.
sorry.
No, it's cool, but I especially get them when I'm looking into the sun and I'm like laying on my stomach and sort of doing that thing where you have to like roll your eye up to see up towards your subject. It's a very specific like formula that gives me these like really bad migraines. And it's every time I shoot in the specific style that I shoot in, where I'm really low looking up, and I always have the sun behind my subject for that really like dramatic backlight, I get really bad headaches. And so this just, I had to get used to it. In fact, it took me a while to even realize like the screen literally would just pop out. I was so amazed. I was so pumped about it. And I thought, oh my gosh, I think I can avoid this whole headache thing by literally just like kind of placing the camera where I need it way down here, tilting it up towards my subject, and just glancing down to make sure everything's composed how I want it to be composed. Because typically my big problem is I'm cutting off like heads or the tips of ears or things that are really important
Right.
in the photo. So that was huge for me. And then also, just the portability of it is pretty incredible. A lot of times I have like this like 70 to 200 on this, huge DSLR with a battery grip, and it's like a big chunkin' monster. And I never actually realized how incredibly heavy my current setup is until I use this. And then I thought, oh my gosh, it can be like this. Unbelievable. So it's pretty cool. I actually, you talked about like carpal tunnel earlier. I actually I'm starting to suffer from like symptoms of that. And because I'm constantly carrying my camera in the same hand. So this is huge.
That's why we need a left-handed camera.
Right, seriously, I am
Just
a
to
lefty.
switch it
It's
up.
funny, but
Switch it up.
Yep, I am a lefty, but I obviously am
I
constantly
feel like
shooting with my
someone
right
must have
hand.
done that somewhere.
We'll be the lefty Lowy edition.
So yeah, I mean,
Limited edition Sony
Right?
Sony left.
Sony
The
left.
Sony L camera.
I love it.
Coming soon. Can we start that?
Let's
I don't-
make it
I don't-
happen.
T-shirt.
Here and now, another
Sony
t-shirt.
L.
T-shirt.
LR1 Mark 7.
I also really noticed how incredibly sharp the files are. And again, for me, I really love that sort of comic book, hyper real, really joyful, epic sort of images of I like to make dogs look like the kings and queens of their world. And the sharpness in the photos, every single tiny hair on their snouts, every little whisker, every little eye boogie, all the things that make dogs so brilliant, It was so sharp. So yeah, honestly, just the total package is pretty incredible, but those specific things were really big sellers for me.
That's awesome.
Ready to pass along? It's very
Your turn,
exciting.
Matt.
I've just been staring at it.
Camera
I want to hold it.
You're
Yeah, I love this camera. I think one of the most important things for me is the buffer. I didn't expect it for me to be this enamored with it, but there have been so many times where I've been shooting something like a celebration. Celebrations are really important. Those the money shots, You're shooting a celebration, and you feel your buffer, and then all of a sudden the player does a knee slide, and your camera's buffering, and you're like, oh my goodness. I've been waiting 89 minutes for this shot, and then the buffer does not want to cooperate. And then having something like this, the buffer is, I want to say endless. I know it's not, but it's endless. Having something like this, and it's something that's so fast is...
We need something like this in our lives.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't want to let go of it.
Well, luckily, there's a table with Sony cameras right over there.
But yeah,
Just walk out with that one.
I wish.
I won't tell anyone.
That'd be our secret.
I'll take it.
I like
Yeah.
that it slowed me down. My favorite mode that I got to shoot it in was just single electronic shutter. And when I was making portraits with the natural light, I knew the frame was there. You get the little brackets when you're making the frame through the finder. And I was like, oh, I feel very confident in this. It's right there. And that confidence, whether you work slow or whether you need to work fast with the higher frame rate, that to me is it's the big thing. And the camera can push and pull both ways. So we're winding down here, but we did want to bring up a slide to show off some of the accessories that you may want to have if you're inclined to pick up a Sony A9.
New hard drives.
New hard drives?
Good one.
7 terabytes.
That is very true.
Fast.
So stuff that you would need. For me, definitely I need to get some new lenses. As a portraitist, I'm thinking of I'm thinking of some of the new portrait glass, but some of the basics that you may want to take with you are definitely a camera bag. Up here from B&H, we're recommending the Domke F2 rugged wear. It's a classic shooter's bag. We have tripod, always a good thing. I'm a huge advocate for the tripod. Helps with composition, and if you're making a slower exposure, always fantastic. And one thing I'm sure sports shooters use this a lot is the monopod. It's sort of
Very
like
important.
very, very important. It helps you if you need to stabilize long glass or shoot a slower exposure.
Or cane.
It's literally just to take off the weight. You don't
Yeah.
want to hold the 400 all day, you know?
It helps you get up off your knees.
Yeah.
For video shooters, I think an external recorder is
Yeah.
very, very important.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yep, and
Get
Ben,
those
I know you
get
use-
those LUTs.
Yes,
Love
and
my
you,
LUTs.
Lutz.
you got to have the fast memory card. If you don't have the
Yes.
fast memory card, you're not going to land it. You got to have the thing. All right, are you all ready for the winner of the brand new Sony A9 camera
yeah.
body?
Is it anyone I know?
I'm a winner right here. I have
There
the
he is.
camera.
Winner.
Everyone's a winner.
Our winner from the live feed questions is Tessa. Tessa, congratulations! You are the winner of a brand new Sony
Amazing.
A9 camera body.
Oh my
I'll
God.
be so
We're
happy
all
right
so
now.
excited for you here. All right, folks, thank you so much for coming and sitting on the
yeah.
panel. We have Sara France, incredible portrait wedding lifestyle photographer, Ben Lowy, amazing photojournalist and world traveler.
Just a good dude.
Just a good dude. Kaylee, thank you so much. This is Kaylee Greer here coming in all the way from Boston. And of course, Matt Stith, straight out of Brooklyn for now.
Montclair, New Jersey.
Montclair, New Jersey?
But I live in Brooklyn.
You live
now.
in Brooklyn,
Yeah.
New York. All right. I'm
Represent
photographer
Jersey. Be
David
proud of
Flores.
that.
I'm
Thank
proud
you
of that.
so
I'm
much
very
for
proud.
joining us for the B&H live stream of the Sony A9 camera. Have a great night.